Welcome. We are live. I hope you're having a good Wednesday night. It's happy hour. Probably wherever you are now, it's happy hour. Or maybe it's just past happy hour on the East Coast. I am Chris Gore from Film Thread. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. I'm going to be joined shortly by my colleague, Alan Ng, the editor-in-chief of Film Thread. We're going to be talking to Christian Toto. We're probably going to be talking about the Kenobi trailer. So welcome to this episode of Hollywood on the Rocks. Look, I drank a lot last night. Believe me. So tonight, I think I'm just going to be doing a little seltzer here, a little seltzer. How's everybody doing? Post your comments and questions. I'll say this, and this is just so you know right off the bat, you cannot send us super chats because it's a long story. I don't want to get into it too much, but we don't have monetization on the Film Threat YouTube channel. It's not nefarious. It's not something bad. It's just we had to make a little alteration behind the scenes with regard to how we set up the Google ads and all that. So that will be resolved in a couple of days. So we're just chatting and having fun together. Let's see who's here today. Shanatsky is here. Shanatsky, yo, nice to see you, Chris. Nice to see you, Shanatsky. JS Pena says, "Hey, Chris, Hut Life or Bounty Hunter Life?" I don't know. I'm thinking Hut Life. Maybe I'm thinking Hut Life. And Shanatsky also says, "Not enough alcohol for modern films." Oh, we're going to get into that today with our special guest. I'm super excited for that guest to join us. Right now, Scott Miller says, "Forgive me for having no interest in Kenobi. Disney killed Star Wars and I no longer care." I understand the sentiment. I'm kind of there with you. Didn't really watch Boba Fett. Watched part of the first episode. Watched a couple of the other episodes. I feel like taking the mystery out of characters, that the whole cool thing about Boba Fett is that we knew nothing about Boba Fett. But then when you know a lot about Boba Fett, turns out it's not all that interesting. I mean, that's what's kind of fun about characters from the Star Wars universe, is that George Lucas could introduce some, just side character, has a line or no lines, just hovering in the background or whatever. Do you remember Aura Singh? Does anyone remember Aura Singh? Come on, one of you knows Aura Singh. So a side character that's just kind of sitting in the background, and then there's a whole lore about that character. But it turns out once you get into that lore and kind of explore it in a series, I don't know. It doesn't always work. It's not all that interesting. Alan Ng is having little problems getting in here. He's late, not entirely his fault. We're having some StreamYard issues. Those of you who use StreamYard, you know what I'm talking about. He'll be joining us momentarily. But do me a favor, please hit that like button. We appreciate it. If you're new watching us, subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate it. And also support Film Threat. Support us and buy something. Look, you could have one of these nifty Film Threat t-shirts. There are many. All types of themes. This one looks like one of the few franchises that Hollywood hasn't ruined yet. So go to shop.filmthreat.com, check it out. You'll find something to buy. Heck, you could get a mug like this one. They're nifty. They hold both hot and cold liquid. I've used it. I've used it for a while now. All right. Let's get into it. I see your comments are flying fast and furious. Anyone know Aura Singh? Anyone in the chat know Aura Singh? One of you has to know. And don't Google it. If you don't know, just don't put it there. But let's see. Scott Miller says, "Oh, he has no interest." That's right. I already read that one. Rin says, "I do wonder what they'll do to Kenobi woke-wise." I think we already saw it in the trailer. I think there's already just sort of some hints of what they may do. Let's see. Scott Miller says the same thing with Solo. He was cool partly because he was mysterious. Exactly. Cubicle Media says, "Aloha, Chris. Kenobi trailer, just eye candy." Yeah, you know what? I gotta say, I'm such a sucker. I'm going, I think this is one I have to watch. I think this is one I have to watch. I'm looking at it. Having said that, the track record with Disney has just been so not good. I mean, where Marvel's going is not a place I care about. JS Pena says Gizmo or Grogu? Gizmo or Grogu? Okay, I don't know. I probably Grogu, although I hate that name. It'll always be Baby Yoda. Also, Infinite Main says keyword yet. Exactly. Geek Truth 64. Hey, you are back. Good to see you, Geek Truth 64. Thank Bob and Bob for Back to the Future not being ruined yet. Although there is a podcast that I do want to recommend called Undiscovered Scripts. It's on all the platforms. Undiscovered Scripts, and there is a script that's not quite a sequel to Back to the Future. It's called Back to the Future, and it's like a fan script, but it's done like, what they do is they take a script and they like embellish it. So it's almost like a radio play. It's pretty awesome, and it's about a Back to the Future super fan that gets involved in Back to the Future. It's very funny, very inside baseball. It should probably never be made, but it is a great radio show. What am I saying? But it feels like a radio play, like, because they've got music and they've got actors playing different parts. So it's a dramatization, let's say. Geek True 64, the Sith. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like that aspect of it. And Bounty Hunter. Oh, yes. Hey, let's see. Frank Rizzo. Aura Singh is a bounty hunter. She was on Tatooine and Phantom Menace, I think in one shot. And then they did a 12-inch action figure of her. So there you go. Scott Miller says, in fairness, I spent a decade running theaters and still have friends in that industry, so I'm a bit jaded. All right, well, maybe, look, I don't know. There's something about the movies are my church. I go every week. So there you have it. I kind of have to go see a movie in a theater every week. Here he is, Alaning, my partner in crime at Film Threat, the editor-in-chief. Alan.
Hey, hey, just saw the Kenobi trailer.
Oh, yeah, well, good. It's a good thing, because I should have mentioned that we're going to talk about it, but that's like the biggest thing today. What are your impressions right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, it's a teaser. I'm interested. I feel like if they screw up Kenobi, all is lost. And I think this is where all the eggs are in a single basket. If Star Wars is to ever turn the right course, or hire Jon Favreau and put him in a executive position at Lucasfilm.
Well, you're a Disney Plus subscriber?
Yeah.
So, the thing is this, I signed up for Disney Plus, and it was one of those deals through D23. If you were a D23 member, which I believe back then was free. I don't know if they charge for it now, but you just have to basically register your info. You got 3 years of Disney Plus for like, I think it ended up being like $4 a month or less than that, which was cool. So I signed up. I'm kind of stuck with it. It's not my go-to. Probably my favorite streaming platform these days, honestly, is HBO Max, and then Netflix here and there. But have you watched like the recent Disney Plus series? Did you watch Hawkeye? I did not watch Hawkeye. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I've watched all the Marvel stuff. I've not watched. I mean, I'll admit I've only seen maybe 3 episodes of The Mandalorian, and that's kind of where I've stopped.
Right.
So I'm far behind, and I think a lot of it has to do with just my job at Film Threat. I don't have time to really invest in a series, and I think it helps that I think with Marvel, at least I'm already familiar with the characters than I am with like the Mandalorian. Boba Fett. I mean, I know Boba Fett from Empire Strikes Back, but what do I really know of him? And then you get caught up in all the chatter and just all the battle toward it.
And also the prequels, right? I mean, that was kind of the origin of all Boba Fett. And I thought one of the things that was successfully done in the Star Wars prequels, but I really feel like this is an opportunity it's an opportunity. I'm not going to say here's my thought and my hope, because I am before the movie opens, I'm an optimist, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, we've seen good movies, bad trailer. For the most part, most trailers are really good, and then the movie ends up being not great or the television show ends up being not great, because it, you know what it does? It tells you that trailer editors really know what the hell they're doing. Trailer editors are good, but I'm super excited about the possibility of answering some questions that went unanswered. People forget, you know, when George Lucas was making Revenge of the Sith, he had actually forgotten that, oh yeah, Obi-Wan has to take Anakin's lightsaber because, you know, in the next movie, he gives it to him. He forgot to shoot that. So this is an opportunity to kind of answer some questions that are kind of vague. Like, wait a second, why did Obi-Wan Kenobi like lie to Luke in such an elaborate way? How does he know who Darth Vader is? I mean, someone pointed out, I was watching another live stream. It was Midnight's Edge, and someone pointed out that like in Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan says he's more machine now than man. Because if the last time that Obi-Wan Kenobi saw Darth Vader, he was just burned and, you know, no arms and no legs, right? For all Obi-Wan Kenobi knows, he died there. Obviously, something happened, you know, so I know people are saying they don't want to see another, you know, encounter between Obi-Wan and Darth, but that could actually answer some questions, right? It could. I mean, I think it's gonna be hard to top that lightsaber duel at the end of Revenge of the Sith, but I would love to somehow have it end where, you know, Darth Vader looks at Obi-Wan and says something along the lines of, if you ever leave this planet, if you ever leave my home, I will destroy you. You know, like it's got to end that way. So anyways, a lot of great chat here. We're going to get to your chat questions and comments. So talk amongst yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves, because we have a guest today, the author. Let me see. Here it is.
You make a banner?
I did make a banner.
Oh, there we go.
Let's bring on the Christian Toto is here. Christian, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. I've got a banner. What more could I ask for?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm so happy. Like, I followed you on Twitter. I followed, like, wait a sec. I got this logo covering my head here. I know how to fix it. I know how to fix it. Here we go. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna put you right there in the hot seat. So, you know, I followed you on Twitter. You make no bones about that. You are a conservative writing about film.
Ew.
Which, yeah, I know. Some would say I always, you know, my politics have always been very middle of the road. When it comes to certain things, I'm conservative. When it comes to raising kids, I have 2 kids that are fully formed adults and responsible for themselves. Tough to do these days. But, you know, when it comes to other things, you know, I don't care who you get naked with. In fact, I'd rather not know any details. Keep them to yourself. But you do you in the privacy of your own home, whatever, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. But things have gotten crazy lately. And your book, Al and I both read your book. What led to wanting to write this book? And I'm really blown away, because a lot of the stories that you outline in the book, like Gina Carano's firing, among other things, you go into far more detail about and kind of put it into the context. And this is your first book as an author.
Yeah, you know, you always want to write a book, but you never actually want to do it. It seems like a lot of work. Yeah. And it is. But I was talking to a publisher on a separate subject. I don't know what we maybe talking about a story I was working on. And he said something akin to, we should work on a book together. And I thought, well, that's flattering. And I don't want to do any extra work because I'm exhausted. And then I thought, well, what do I write about? And it was like you know, what I write about every day on my website, what I talk about in my podcast, what I'm obsessed with is this whole woke culture. And I, you know, at the end of the day, I think my outrage about this woke culture is not really political. I mean, at least it shouldn't be political. And I also think Hollywood has a lot of guilt for being for being less than inclusive over the last 30, 40 years, you know, heaven forbid, going even beyond that. And so I think that guilt they have collectively has gone into overdrive, and the overcorrection is what we're seeing right now. And it's just really, it's clamping down on creativity, and it's making us self-censor. And while we're seeing that across the board in the culture at large, it's certainly happening in Hollywood. And I don't think that's the way you get great movies and TV shows, frankly.
Well, I mean, if you even think about, I think the death of comedy, right? Like you look at like how comedians have been, canceled over jokes. I'm like, look, if I don't like a comedian's jokes, fine. I probably just maybe not listen or tune into that comedian. My reaction to something is if I don't like it, I just don't support it, right?
Yeah.
Like please don't judge. I'm not a fan of country music, but if people want to make country music, they want to go to country music concerts, great. But the idea of a group of people going out to stop something from happening because they don't like it, imposing their personal likes and dislikes on all of us, I am vehemently against. So like you, I really despise the rise of woke culture and how it's efforts to control everything, including what Hollywood celebrities think about certain things. I mean, I don't take advice from really any Hollywood celebrities on politics at all. I just don't. There are very few of them that are informed, really informed when it comes to issues. So I just ignore that noise. But they're free to have those views. But what led to, like, how did you even take, because this is a monster topic. You put it into, I don't know, what is it, 50, 60,000 words at least. It's a lot of words.
That's a good that's a good estimation. I think it was a little north of there, but yeah, you're on it.
But how did you organize it and go about it? And like, what stories did you choose to, like, this is one I really want to go in detail on and whatnot. So what went into like the organizing of the topics? And I want to get to questions. So in our comments and chat, please, if you have questions for Christian Toto, he's right here with us tonight.
Yeah, I love the questions. I love some naysayers or even just people who disagree with me. That'd be wonderful too. When I first got the idea for the book, I sketched out some chapters. And it was mostly what you see in the book right now. It didn't take long. It was all top of mind. And I think the ones I was really passionate about was the film criticism chapter for sure, the Gina Carano one. And I had kind of done a deep dive in Ghostbusters so aggressively. It seemed like I should go back to that. And again, that's 5-6 years ago now, but it really did set a template for what we're seeing in the culture now. And there were so many different interesting forces at play between the studio, the actors, pop culture, journalism too. I couldn't avoid that chapter as well. So again, these are just things I've been working on relentlessly because I really, this is a real passion of mine. And so I think the one thing I really want to do, and you can either agree or quietly disagree, and we could talk about it off air, is that I didn't want it to be like a dirge. I wanted to keep the prose a bit lively, some humor there, because this is a depressing topic. And I didn't want it to be sort of this doom and gloom. I wanted to have some levity to it because I think you need that when you're talking about conversations like this.
Well, my colleague Alan Ng, who's the editor-in-chief of Film Threat, those were his first words after he finished reading it. I kept telling Alan, like, you got to read this book. And to be fair, I'm gonna admit I bought the Audible version. I'm very well listened. I like to multitask, and I throw on a book and I walk for 5 miles in my neighborhood in Pasadena.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, podcasts are amazing for me. They changed my life.
But Alan, really, his first words were like, man, this book is depressing. So Alan, I know you have some questions for Christian here.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it, and I really like the book. I did find myself like wrestling with a lot of things because, I always find myself in this weird position because I'm not white and I'm not black. And I find myself watching this kind of tension that goes on between the two. But there's a lot on my mind, but I think the first thing I'd like to get into is, I agree with you up front. I think woke culture is destroying good storytelling. And I'm not against wokeness, so to speak. I'm just against it being forced into a story, being shoehorned and jammed into a story where it doesn't really belong. I would say like United States versus Billie Holiday was a very woke movie. And I think for me, it's storytelling. Be woke as all you want, but at least tell a good story. And I feel like, and you bring it up a lot in your book, that we're just jamming things into good stories, and therefore we're ruining these stories.
I mean, I think it often, one of the things that depresses me most about this is when you have that woke moment, a lecture, a character who comes in, it yanks you out of the experience. And at the end of the day, you want to get lost in a movie. When I go to review a movie, I have a pad and paper in hand, and I'm writing notes. I'm a critic. I feel like I should be doing something akin to that. But I love it when when at some point in the movie, hopefully early on, I just put it down. I think, okay, I'll get to it later. I'll remember enough to write a competent review, but I want to lose myself in the movie. I mean, that's ultimately what they're there for. That's what the experience is. And I think a lot of times with these woke little moments, they just yank you out of it. All of a sudden you realize you're in a theater, you're at home, you've got a remote in your hand, you're watching TV, and this story is trying to, tell you something that's important for them. And, I think that's wrong. And I want to almost preempt what a possible question for you is that I think with this whole woke culture, if you look at it on the surface, you think, well, this is a good thing. Hollywood has done a poor job of being diverse, of letting all the voices be heard, and that this is a course correction. But what I see consistently throughout the woke culture is inconsistency, where they will punish certain people in ways that seem really just above and beyond how they should be punished, and other people just skate on by. And just a quick example, you read what happened to Gina Carano, but Bette Midler has said far worse and far meaner things on social media without an ounce of outrage. And Alec Baldwin's entire career, even before the tragic shooting, was a case study in someone who should have been canceled a dozen times. And I listened to Howard Stern for like 30 years. You could take a week of his shows from the late 80s, early 90s, and he wouldn't be allowed to show his face anywhere. So why are they not canceled? And why is the outrage mob not going after them? It's very often politically based. And that's why I distrust this movement, because if it's for a better society, we may disagree with some tactics, but how could you disagree with that? But it's not. It's not about that. It's something different.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I see it being disingenuous and hypocritical, where people are not held. I believe in people being held to the same standards, right? Like, and so, I mean, my God, Alec Baldwin, I mean, he is the penultimate shit poster. I mean, he just has said horrible things, and a lot of that really came back to bite him, like after, of course, the recent, horrible accident. And what happened. I mean, there's more to come out about that, but there's a lot of questions in the chat. I want to continue to sing the praises of your book. It is on Amazon right now. It is very highly rated, 4.5 stars. The audio book, whether you get the audio or the actual physical book, just get it, because what I love about the book also is that you acknowledge and recognize that there are people, this pop culture space on YouTube, people who talk about pop culture. Like, you recognize in the book, you talk about people like, Gary from Nerdrotic. You talk about Chrissy Mayer and how she kind of transformed her comedy career. And that's a whole other conversation about the death of comedy, not just stand-up comedians, but you can't even make a Blazing Saddles or an Animal House now at all. There's so many movies. There's my favorite comedies. You can't make them. You just can't make them. I mean, comedy in just overall we talk about the superhero movies and Star Wars and whatnot that have been affected, but comedy as a genre has died. And I just wonder what your thoughts are that. And then I want to get to questions in the chat, because it's really blowing up here. You're very
good. I want to steal from Joe Rogan, who addressed this very subject this week. He said, woke is killing comedy movies. And he was basically saying the R-rated versions, the Hangovers, the Bridesmaids, the, Role Models, things like that. And he's right. But what he drilled down to, which I think is very good, and it's why I guess he's such a good podcaster, he said, you can see murder and mayhem and death and destruction on screens today, kind of like what you always could. And of course, in recent years, it's gotten bloodier. But if a character in a comedy does something that's unpleasant or untoward or something you wouldn't do or I wouldn't do, all of a sudden it seems like a comedy setting is supporting or endorsing that behavior, and it completely isn't. And that's why the outrage begins. And I mentioned Animal House from the 40, 50 years ago. There was a scene where John Belushi is looking at he's peeping Tomming the sorority girls, and I guess they're undressing, and he's looking at them, and then he falls off the ladder. And I think that was called out by the USA Today. They had a young reporter who was complaining about the movie for not being woke. And I'm thinking, if I don't have a daughter, but if I had a daughter, I wouldn't want her in that room. If I had a son, I wouldn't want him to be acting like John Belushi. This is a comedy. these aren't role models that I'm supposed to be cheering on. They're goofy, moronic people who are doing crazy things to make us laugh. And sometimes being bad on screen is cathartic. It's a release. We would never do that, but isn't that goofy? Isn't that crazy? And also, comedy is often based on meanness and cruelty. A pie to the face, slipping on a banana peel, a bucket over someone's head when they enter the doorway. A lot of the stuff is just cruel, but within the context of humor, within the sort of, it's crafted in a way where we know that people aren't being harmed, but we do kind of laugh at it. We've all heard dirty jokes and raunchy jokes, maybe even a racially charged joke. And sometimes the uncomfortable nature of it makes us laugh because we weren't expecting it. We're not supposed to. We're supposed to be pure and innocent and accept everything that way. But sometimes we just innately react to things, and sometimes we laugh, and sometimes we laugh at jokes we're not supposed to. And you take all that and you just basically say, oh, you can't do it anymore. Is it any wonder we don't have any R-rated comedies that are great? I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of the last one. I mean, there have been some small indies that have made the attempt. What was that one, Alan? What's it? Donnie's Bar Mitzvah.
Oh, yeah.
Would strongly recommend it. It's not a big budget. It's a low budget, but there are some jokes in it that are racially charged. There's but it's nothing that you haven't heard in other great comedies. And to be fair, to explain that John Belushi scene, it was his boner that pushed him away slowly. And then
that makes it all
do the
right.
math on that one, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is the thing that really has made me sad more than anything is where are the great raunchy comedies? I just think of God, and Mel Brooks. I've just always been a fan of Mel Brooks, back from when I was a kid, back from when I saw Young Frankenstein, probably too young, didn't understand all the jokes, but came to appreciate it later. That's a movie that is just so and so a lot of that humor in Young Frankenstein from Mel Brooks, very innocent. It's very juvenile, but I just where is it? As a society, isn't there something we can all collectively laugh? Or do you think that a lot of the virtue signaling and whatnot I think a lot of it is disingenuous. I think it's oh yeah, well, I am even woker than you, that's not enough.
Well, I think it's both disingenuous and not representative of the country at large. I still think that most people are not thinking along these lines, are not as passionate as this small minority who happen to be very loud and get a lot of people's attention. Another quick note about these bawdy comedies, especially in recent years. I just recently rewatched Shallow Hal. Not a great movie, not huge laughs, a few sprinkled in. And it certainly has a lot of fat jokes. And I think, looking at fat jokes today, they're lazy. They can be mean-spirited for sure. But they were in the service of a bigger story about how men are so, driven by beauty and image, and how the whole story was this guy who was a jerk, and he explains why, but it's kind of a silly prologue. But he comes to really appreciate inner beauty, literally. I mean, he really does have a transformation where that's not important to him anymore. So to go from these fat jokes, which can be cruel and maybe, lame, but it was really telling a different kind of story, a richer story. And even the American Pie films, there are sweet moments there. The Judd Apatow films, 40-Year-Old Virgin, the guy can't get laid. And the climax, no pun intended, is that he waits until marriage when he meets the girl of his dreams instead of just shagging her immediately. That's really, you can say conservative, you can say old fashioned, but within all these wacky, extremely raunchy movies, there's a sweetness there. And I don't like the fact that we can't have these stories anymore, because I think it's a great way to get to the sweet, gooey center, like a candy bar.
Yeah, I think about the Amy Schumer movie where she hits her head and realizes and thinks she's beautiful. And she had a point to be made about beauty and looks. And it was completely lost on the woke mob, I'll call it, the internet mob. And this is the thing that bothers me the most is, these storytellers have something on their heart they want to tell, and they don't do it. They do it in the way that they think is the best way for them. Mm-hmm. And then we somehow have to correct them and say, no, you did it wrong. And now we've taken a perfectly good story and just ruined it for her and for everyone else, and just tainted it in a way.
The news cycle around that movie was fascinating. Her reaction was fascinating too. She was backpedaling. She was apologizing. I remember one series of quotes where she was basically saying, gosh, I wish a disabled woman of color was the star. I'm thinking, you produced the movie. You cashed the checks. You're in front of the camera. Don't even go there. It was ridiculous. But she felt so afraid of that mob coming after her. And, both of her more recent films got that attack, Snatched and I Feel Pretty. Both were savage because they weren't woke enough. And, she's a pretty progressive comedian. She's a feminist. I have issues with her feminism because I think it's incomplete, to say the least. But I mean, you're going to attack her, who else is going to get under attack? Because, if you're a comedian, would you want to go there? Would you want to tackle these projects? It seems really defeating. And a lot of actors have very thin skins. They're empathetic. They're sensitive. Would you want to go through that trial by error?
Yeah, it's just so sad to see. And in particular, companies react. I almost think in some cases, companies, there's like a sort of lack of just like standing up and just saying, no, this is what we're doing. It is a comedy movie that you chose to spend money on. I almost think, in a sense, the woke mob is looking for something to be upset about. But I think wokeness itself is ripe for comedy. And SNL, which has not been funny in a very long time, it's just straight up state propaganda at this point. It's sad to see. I used to stay up when I was a kid, and watching SNL was like, oh wow, I shouldn't be watching this. I'm just, but I got to stay up late on a Saturday night and watch that. It was a ritual. And watching it less and less. It finally got down to years ago. I was like, well, I can watch SNL in 30 minutes because I fast forward through the commercials, the musical guest, just get to the sketches. And it's unwatchable. But the one and only time SNL, and look this up after this live stream, go look it up. It's on YouTube. They did a fake commercial for woke jeans. Do you remember that?
It was spectacular. And it's several years old now. But they were kind of ahead of the curve, and it was an outstanding fake commercial. It was beautifully produced, funny as heck, right on target. And they do that maybe once every 6 years now. Good.
Yeah. Ryan Gosling was in it, but it's from 2017, 5 years ago.
Wow.
So, and then since then, they don't even touch on anything woke. Yeah. It's really sad. I do want to we have so many questions, so I'm going to go through the comments and questions that are for you. And thank you, Christian. I don't know how much time you have, but let me know. Let me know when you got to take off. But first thing I noticed, and Geek Truth 64 pointed it out, that physical media collection, my God, dude, you should win an award for that.
Okay, first of all, I'm showing my age just by having physical media. Second of all, most of these were sent to me by different film studios and screeners and things like that. And third of all, I'm just so busy, I don't have even time to sit down and enjoy all these wonderful movies. So it's a little disingenuous, but it is what it is.
Well, here we go. Let's get through, because there are a lot. I mean, a lot of comments here. Shinatsky says, I don't view Schumer as a comedian, more of an embarrassment. Well, there you go. Shinatsky also says there was a script on the blacklist called Social Justice Warrior. That sounds interesting. And then let's get over here. I'm just gonna. Hollywood knew about Jeffrey Epstein for years, and he's just the one we found out about. Yeah,
they all knew. I mean, Tarantino knew, Brad Pitt knew. I'm sure many, many more people knew. If it wasn't an open secret, it was the closest thing to it. And everyone wanted to protect themselves. And it's a whole different conversation, by the way. But I do want to say, yes, too many people knew, and too many people said nothing.
Yeah, Scott Miller says, never forget, Hollywood knew about and covered for Harvey Weinstein for decades. They have no standing to lecture anyone.
That's the one that bothers me the most. It was like, they knew, they protected him. They literally protected him. And how many victims did he go through before they said, okay, now's the time to feed him to the wolves?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, there's so many photos of Weinstein with everybody, Oprah, Hillary Clinton, the Obamas. It's weird. TT says, we call it the Farrell effect over here, because every time he released a movie for a while over there, we would be calling the police every few hours after 10 p.m. in the pubs and clubs over here. Okay, I don't sure if I understand the statement.
I don't think I do.
Bez says, Fast Times, Porky's. Yeah, those movies would never be made today.
Yeah.
Would never. And
Revenge of the Nerds, you can add.
Revenge of the Nerds? I don't know. Here we go. Geek Truth 64. Star Trek The Next Generation era is a perfect example of telling a story to pose cultural questions, but the story has to come before any message or agenda, and Hollywood is incapable / unwilling to understand nuance. Great point. Great point. Here we go. We got some boy, there's a lot here. I'm gonna have to get of course Arbuckle Jawa says get woke, go broke. That and then look at USA Dreamhouse's what are Amazon doing to Rings of Power? I don't know if you have any opinion on that. We've only seen like a trailer that's less than a minute. I'm holding judgment, but I'm not interested. I mean, the Lord of the Rings movies are great, and those trailers were great, and I didn't care about that, and I became engaged. This, I'm just like, I just sort of, I don't really know what to think about it. Well, what are your thoughts, Christian?
Yeah, the push, the people behind the scenes, the people who are promoting it are really embracing this sort of diversity. And if they had just said, we got a black elf, we got a this or that, but really it's about Tolkien, it's about, I'm okay with that. I think very, very, very few people are aghast that Nick Fury is now a black man, or that Catwoman is now, I think Zoe Kravitz is Jewish and black, whatever she is.
Right.
I don't see any outrage about it, but people are upset when it's pushed in your face, when the focus is on that as opposed to the story, the history, the tradition, the canon. That's where people kind of get upset. And it just seemed like the marketing for this Lord of the Rings really, it has my spider senses tingling, because I think when you have a lot of confidence in the product, you need nothing like that. And the Ghostbusters is a great example. I think the Ghostbusters team knew they had a mediocre movie on their hands, and they were kind of looking at a plan B to get some excitement around it. And yet a year later, we had Wonder Woman, which was this big first major female superhero. I know there've been some before, but in this modern era, it was a big deal. There was none of that. There was no rah-rah girl power stuff. It was just Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, see what you think. And the movie was wildly enjoyable, and Gadot was amazing in it and perfectly cast, and that was it. And it was a huge hit. So I almost think there's, on some level, there's an insecurity that they know the product may not be good enough. Now, again, we don't know what Lord of the Rings is going to be, but I'm sensing something. That's all.
I think we saw that with No Time to Die, where I think the marketing of that made it look like it was this woke progressive movie. Yes. And then when you finally watch it, it was like, no, they actually handled it right. The whole idea of passing a 007 moniker onto a black woman at that point. And
it was a big nothing burger. It was beautifully handled, absolutely. Not a big deal. But in a year and a half of marketing, because of the pandemic kept pushing the release aside, it was, you can't call them Bond girls. Hey, that Sean Connery guy, I think he was kind of rapey in the early Bond movies. I mean, people love these movies, and yes, they're flawed. And yes, we don't want Daniel Craig to swat a woman on the butt during the new movies, and that happened, back in the day. But let's have some love for this. Let's enjoy it. Let's make it, a celebration of this franchise. When you kind of have that marketing push, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun. And this movie actually underperformed here. I think it did well overseas, but as a Bond movie in the U.S., I don't think the numbers are very good.
I think when it comes to Nick Fury, you mentioned him earlier. It wasn't like Marvel Studios said, we are going to cast a black Nick Fury. They cast an incredible actor. They cast Sam motherfucking Jackson. So when you do that, it's like, oh my God, like you can totally see it, right? Yeah, I mean, he's got the eye patch, he's got the look, he's got the gravitas. What do? They cast a great actor. When they go after we want a specific type, it just seems so disingenuous. I mean, did Ridley Scott think in his head when he was doing Alien back in the late 70s, 1979, I believe is when that was released, did he think, you know what? I want one of the engineers to be black. They just cast Yaphet Kotto. It's awesome, right? Like it's, I really feel that, like, look, just go for the best. That's why I don't really care about the Lord of the Rings so much. It's like, if it works, it just works. If I'm engaged in the character story, that's fine. I do know that there are Tolkien purists, and I think that I really think they probably should have listened to that audience better. For me, I don't care, but I'm a normie. I'm not a super fan of Lord of the Rings. I love the movies. The Peter Jackson first 3 movies, great. We don't talk about them all that much because you know what? They're practically perfect films. And they really stand up.
Chris, I love that explanation. I think you mentioned it recently, and it rang so true that we're still bickering about The Last Jedi because it was such a you know what show.
Right.
And yet we don't talk about Lord of the Rings, except we watch it every 2 years because we love it so much. What's there to say? What was wrong? What was disappointing? What was outrageous? And by the way, when it comes to, we don't like, we're all cavemen and we don't like powerful women. We've been worshiping Ripley and Princess Leia for 40, 50 years without a hint of reservation. We love those characters because they were characters, because they were flawed, because they were wonderful, they were strong. And we just accepted them into our hearts. And I think some characters aren't that way. Rey in the recent Star Wars, I don't think I dislike her as much as others do, but she didn't win her way into my heart. I don't care about those new characters at all. I wish I did. I didn't. And then Kelly Marie Tran's character, I think I have her name right, in the last two movies, I could care less about her. There's nothing wrong with her as an actress. She could be perfectly fine, but that character is boring to me.
Yeah. Scott Miller has a question. Christian, with the decline of the superhero genre, in your opinion, what's the next big thing?
Oh gosh, my crystal ball is not that good. I'd like to say something that kind of breaks through the woke barrier on the comedy front, but I don't even smell anything that's even approaching that. We just see it on very low levels, like Ryan Long's videos and things like that. I don't know. I watch my kids and they're obsessed with video games, and my son just got an Oculus, and I kind of get the sense that some sort of maybe merging between movies and VR. And it's an area I don't know enough about, but I kind of feel like that may be something that's really, in 10 years we'll all be doing or getting involved in. But my crystal ball is really weak. I don't know. But and I also, people say, oh, Hollywood's killing itself and Hollywood's just, I don't see that either. I see a ton of streaming platforms. I see rich people getting richer. I see I see there's enough excitement for certain products. And I think Hollywood technically seems to be just fine right now.
Well, I will say when it comes to your kids and the new generation coming up, video games are the number one platform. Video games are the most popular form of entertainment. I would say TikTok is up there. I would say going to the movies is probably lower on the list for your kids than for you, because I know you have such a passion for film. I mean, not just in your book, but also in your other writing. I've read you on occasion. You do write for the Daily Wire. I've seen your name there, but you have a real passion for true cinema. So, I mean, you have the evidence behind you.
And, by the way, I can't get my kids to watch movies. I'm having some minor successes, but I have to almost beg them. Come on, buddy, this is good. Listen, it's an R-rated comedy, and it's not a super R-rated, but it's a little R. My kid's like 13. I'm like, please, just come on. I'll make popcorn. What do you want from me? Come sit down and watch a movie with me. And part of it is I want to relive that with them. I also don't want their attention spans to be this big for the next 20, 30 years. So I have, I've got multiple reasons for it. But then, certain movies, they sit down, we have a grand time, and they're sold for a little while. We had a great What About Bob experience. I showed them Borat way too early. I'm embarrassed as a parent. But God, did we howl? But I want to gently kind of introduce them to, hey, movies are pretty cool too, and I hope I can succeed. I don't know.
My household's the same way. I can't get my daughter to see movies or get excited about it, but it's interesting. She's way into anime right now, and it's very interesting because this is not American storytelling. This is almost free storytelling, and part of me feels like, well, what if one day Hollywood got a hold of anime and started controlling the story at that point? She'll probably change her tune at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's speaking to her in a very unique and special way. So that's promising as well. I am so out of the loop on anime. Again, it's my age speaking, but some people are so passionate about it. And it seems like I don't want to say fresher, but there's something about it that really kind of fills a gap that seems to be missing in Hollywood Inc.
Well, I think it's what Hollywood's not doing anymore. It's risky storytelling. It's being able to tell a story that might push or cross a boundary that you're uncomfortable with. And I think we need more of that in Hollywood.
A question from Infinite Maine for Christian. What moment in time would you say Hollywood went full out woke? For me, I think it was Ghostbusters 2016.
Yeah, that's a real turning point. I think from a cultural point of view, when Trump was running for office, like late night TV really just broke out the pom-poms for Hillary. And that just seemed like a sad moment. And that's more political than woke, but there is sizable overlap at times. But I think that the Ghostbusters was sort of a moment in time. And then I think it feels like the culture right now is changing with such ferocity and speed that it's hard to even judge it. So maybe in the last 2 years, it's kind of hit warp speed. I don't know. It's hard to pick a defining moment. It's a little fuzzy for me, but where we are makes me unhappy. I'll say that.
I will say that Ghostbusters 2016 is the first time, like, I just didn't like that movie. And I saw it in the theater, and I was in a pretty empty theater. There might have been 10 people on a Friday night, opening night. And I'm looking around, and it was just like, there's a couple chuckles. And I actually genuinely like all those actresses, right? I think that they've been much better in other things. It just felt sad, like they were just throwing things at the wall. And it was, to me, objectively not funny, not a great reaction from the crowd, not like the highs of previous comedies I've seen. I do think that that was probably the moment there. Scott Miller asks, what is the best / most entertaining movie in the last 5 years that few have heard of? Well, I will say, before you answer that question, Christian, we cover a lot of those movies at Film Threat. That's why I hope you've subscribed to our channel, where you read the filmthreat.com, because we discover those. I mean, I would say Psycho Goreman. If you've not seen Psycho Goreman, it is a horror movie, but it's also a comedy. It's also on Shudder right now. There's a movie we mentioned earlier, Donnie's Bar Mitzvah, a very raunchy comedy. Is it set in the 90s? Like it's
I think it's late 80s,
early 90s. Early 90s. Like it literally, it's like someone pulls out a bar mitzvah tape, plays the tape, and that tape is the movie. And it's just all the crazy stuff that happens at a bar mitzvah. It's incredibly raunchy and inappropriate. So Donnie's Bar Mitzvah would be one.
Call Me Brother, you can add to that one too.
Yeah, exactly. What do you have one, Christian, that you can?
Yeah, I've got two. I actually interviewed the director, the writer, directors, the stars just before the pandemic hit. It's called The Climb, and it's a great buddy movie. It really has an honesty about male relationships, male friendships, and it's funny, and it's visually very creative. I really love that movie. And also, it's on Hulu right now, is Riders of Justice. Mads Mikkelsen. It came out last year. It might have been my favorite movie last year, though. I thought last year was terrible. This is a vigilante comedy. What the hell is that? But it's good, and it really kind of caught me off guard. So, and I love Mads Mikkelsen. And I always talk about Housebound. It's one of my favorite horror comedies. Maybe 6 years ago, so maybe not as recent, but it's New Zealand horror comedy storytelling. And I think you can see it on Tubi, which is a great free movie app, by the way. I really recommend that one. But those are three just off the top of my head.
We've got like so many interesting comments here. People really like, not necessarily asking questions, but people just saying, here we go. Scott again loved Christian Toto whenever he would appear on the Dennis Miller podcast. So, and then Shanatsky says, I made up a new word this day. People like to say member berries. I created dismember berries, which are things which destroy your pleasant memories.
I love that. And by the way, here's one more movie. I started watching this movie. It's a couple years old. And I thought, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I hate it. I can't believe I spent 20 minutes on it. And then by the end, I was sad it was over. It was called The Greasy Strangler.
Yes! We've covered it. We've covered The Greasy Strangler. I think it's a trauma movie.
Well, I'm not sure what the derivation is. And I think the filmmakers, I think he had a follow-up movie, which was not as good, I think. But I mean, I can't. I want to see it right now. Just talking about it, it's hard R. It's sexual. It's graphic. It's silly. It's disgusting. It's absurd. And I love the soundtrack so much. I don't even want to describe what it is, because you kind of have to experience it. But just know you'll hate it and then you'll love it, or maybe you just hate it and hate it. But I don't know.
There's some good recommendations in the chat here. Geek Truth 64, Tucker and Dale versus Evil was a good movie, but that wasn't in the last 10 years. Yeah, I actually saw that at South by Southwest when it came out, which will be, I don't know if you go to South by Southwest or cover the movies from it. We'll be covering it. We're not physically going to Austin this year, but South by Southwest will have some gems, like in particular when they do midnight movies or they're bigger, they're one of the film festivals that really does like champion horror and genre movies, because the audiences in Austin, I think, are well trained. But like, I'm curious about your thoughts on this, Christian. Is, Alan and I have been going to film festivals for years, and we've gotten to the point now where every major film festival that we go to now, we get a little questionnaire asking, what is your race? what gender do you identify as? What is your sexuality? And here we're usually getting a team to cover. And I'm like, there are people that we work with as writers at Film Threat, and we have a very open door. If you want to write for Film Threat, you can click the contact button. It goes right to Alan and I. You can, we are always recruiting writers. We've got a sort of a regular stable of like 30 writers. I don't know what their sexuality is. I don't know it's not a question we ask. Do you love movies? And can you show us samples of your reviews? Yeah. Do you have particular interest? Do you like documentaries or particular genres? Great. You're in but this weird thing we've seen now where they're asking what I feel are very personal questions, almost as a way to kind of vet the media that's going to be attending the festival. I wonder if you had any thoughts about this or were aware of it.
Let me just add, it's more insidious than that. When I set up the team for a certain high-profile film festival, I had to report the sexual identity of the team going, which I feel is even worse.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of this. I'm not shocked by any of it.
Right.
It's, I love the work that you all do there because you just kind of focus on the movies, mm-hmm. and let it go flow from there. I'm kind of speechless. I have to say, I actually would love to talk to the people behind the scenes and say, hey, what is the purpose of this? Why are you asking this? Why does this matter? And I always find the diversity conversations a little humorous because it does matter to a certain degree for sure. And we want to be as diverse as possible. There's nothing wrong with that. And, the more perspectives, the better, the more voices, the better, but they don't give a damn about having a right of center, a critic on their staff and this behind the scenes or anywhere. I mean, imagine if there was one conservative writer on Saturday Night Live's writing team. Would shake things up. I'm sure either there is none or he or she is so afraid to even say anything that they just go along with the flow. So that's why some of the diversity talk, which should be wholesome and good and important in nature, kind of sometimes annoys me because for that reason.
Yeah. It annoys me too, just because I've always thought diversity of thought, that's the true diversity, right? Yeah. And that shouldn't be ascribed to sort of your outward characteristics. And also just because you look a certain way doesn't even mean you think a certain way, right? Yeah. I'm always just attracted to people who have different ideas, even if they conflict with my own. One of our writers that Alan works with on a regular basis, she's an ardent feminist. And of course we throw her movies to review that we know that she may have more insight into, but I like having those different perspectives on Film Threat. So it's fine. I'll read stuff on my own website that I disagree with, but I like it. I like that it's represented. And what I find very bizarre now is media outlets have sort of planted flags of this is where we stand politically. And even when, just bringing it up because, you write for the Daily Wire. Daily Wire put out the movie Shut In, which is written by a woman whose script was on the blacklist for years, and it finally got made. And people were actively encouraging not to cover the movie because of how it was being distributed, right? I don't, which is so bizarre to me. Have you noticed? I mean, I've actually noticed it feels like media outlets kind of they feel like they have to say here's where we stand politically. And I feel like media shouldn't take a specific political stand.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it's The Nation or Mother Jones or National Review, I think it's a very different story. But if it's IndieWire is so funny to me because it does a lot of good work and some of the writing is excellent. But they'll write this super woke commentary, and then I'll read on the comments section. No one's happy with it. They're all angry with it. Right. And these seem like they're fans of the site. So they should be on board with it, but they're not. And I find more often than not, they just take away the comment section and they just keep on keeping on. So it's sort of bizarre. Oh, really? But I think my bigger issue with the media right now, and I'm shocked by this. I mean, I keep seeing it. I'm aware of it. I'm not dumb. But the fact that the media is pro cancel culture and pro attacks on free speech, I can't wrap my brain around it. The Wrap.com, which again is a good site, and they do a lot of solid writing. They had this 4-part series on cancel culture. Like, oh, good, this is going to be interesting. It was mostly, if not uniformly, pro cancel culture. They even had one seminar or sort of group chat about comedy. I'm like, oh, finally, you got to get some someone who has a different point of view. And they had Jim Norton on. I'm like, oh God, Jim Norton is like this really irreverent, crazy, very funny comedy guy. And I'm thinking he's going to be interesting. And then at the last minute, he bowed out. I don't know why or how, but the conversation was just, let's go cancel culture, essentially. I can't believe it. I really can't.
Yeah, it's just bizarre how things just had this shift. Patrick Lemire has a couple interesting comments. Politics in media was very heavy in 70s. It's cyclical. Well, I think, I mean, I don't know. I you know, in the 70s, I was a kid, right? So I'll remember what I remember, but it didn't seem this divided. And my family, you know, like, you know, it's sort of more middle of the road politics, probably more left leaning, but also, you know, there's a reason the term Reagan Democrat exists, right? Like a lot of people liked a lot of the things that Reagan had to say. So I don't know if it's cyclical. It feels different this time. And then Patrick goes on to say, check boxes are anti-privacy. I agree. I don't feel comfortable, you know, having to ask our team who works for us, well, you're going to this film festival. I've never asked you this before, but how strange, right?
Yeah. Do you like to dress up in a diaper? Do you like feet? Like, give me some more. I got a questionnaire I got to fill out. It's just line up your fetishes. So I get this out of the way because we got paperwork here. No, it's just crazy. And you know, by the way, politics is great in movies. It can enrich movies. It could change the way you think sometimes. You know, I think that some of Aaron Sorkin's work can be wonderful and thought-provoking. I'm not against that, you know, but I also do have a pet peeve about celebrities who get in a soapbox and never get a single tough but fair question about their soapbox. That drives me crazy.
Well, I think for the most part, a lot of celebrities, when you really look at their views, they're not particularly informed. You know, what you would call a low information voter, where they're just looking at the surface level or echoing or parroting the narrative that they hear. And a lot of it is they want to get hired. So they want to put out there that I've got the right views, everybody. I've got the right views. You can hire me. Cause I just think, I mean, I noticed it when I first moved to LA, like in the early 90s, I just remember like, and now it's sort of, you know, at first there was the AIDS ribbons, right? Everyone would wear the ribbon and just to show their support. And then the ribbons became many different colors, which represented different things to the point of ridiculousness where you couldn't tell, well, what's the purple ribbon? What's that one, you know? And it's just, you know, it's disingenuous. It's phony. It's, you know, I really always disliked that fakeness. But Geek Truth 64 says, my question would be, are you asking my identity to discard my review? And if not, why are you asking? What impact do you believe it has on my movie opinion? I mean, that you know, I just like, I just put prefer not to answer. They do have an option, prefer not to answer. And I check the box, prefer not to answer for every question. Because it's ridiculous.
Well, I think they also may be trying to post festival say our members were this percentage of this, and like we had the most diverse festival in years. Right. Maybe that's sort of that's what they're kind of tallying up in a way. But it does seems. I'm uncomfortable with it. So
I mean, I think originally there was good thought behind it. It was to make sure that there was a representation of diversity of those covering it. You know, and I'll admit I certainly benefit from that. But you know, how granular are you going to get, you know, and then, you know, are you just going to bring people on who are not necessarily qualified? And I think that's ultimately it. It's, you know, let's bring diversity, but also make sure they're qualified to do the job as well.
Yeah. It's frustrating. I want to get back to, I think we've talked about Amy Schumer before.
Right.
And I wrote about this extensively in my book, maybe not even maybe we should have hit on it harder. Where were the Hollywood feminists when Gina Carano was being roasted by Disney? They all stood down. They're all powerful women's marching feminists. And when she was treated poorly by a major corporation, they went silent. They just went silent. And I thought that was so wrong. And you could say, listen, I don't even agree with Gina Carano, but you know, she's allowed to say what she wants to say on social media. We all do say some things, and sometimes we disagree with stuff. Sometimes we say dumb things on social media. We've all done that. But I don't think she should lose her job because of it. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That would be such an important moment. And I also say this wherever I go. wouldn't it be great if Tom Hanks or Meryl Streep or George Clooney or Denzel Washington just went full on against cancel culture and said, listen, I don't want my conservative friends to lose jobs in Hollywood. I don't want comedians to lose their jobs because they told the wrong joke. This has got to stop. I think we can all agree about this. Wouldn't it be great for them to use their clout in an arena where they actually do matter? They are artists. They should be defending art. They should be defending free speech. And the vast majority of them are just silent. And it's a shame. It really is a shame.
Well, Infinite Main says Gina was right. I've followed her on social media, and I think that she was really trying to make a point about how the media is trying to divide us. They're trying to vilify certain types of people. And so actually, for the most part, like really actually
she was right.
her presence. And this is a very interesting comment from Shanatsky here, says Final Draft has inclusivity analysis as a feature now. I'm working on a script right now in Final Draft, and I didn't know that. I don't know how that would fly with a movie like Licorice Pizza, but also, like, who cares? You know what? Like, when I see like, say, a Korean horror, I don't care if it's diverse. It's a Korean horror film, like it's just like Parasite, right? Like, so are we going to complain about the lack of diversity in Parasite, which won Best Picture? Like the standard is ridiculous. I think it's okay to have movies with only Black people in them.
Yeah.
That would be great. Or, you know what? Maybe there's some movies with only white people. So what? It's like, there's so much of an emphasis on this now that it's I don't think it's helping. Yeah,
I think Crazy Rich Asians was probably one of the better rom-coms of the last 10 years. It's almost entirely Asian cast. And I understand that matters because you don't see that very often. Right. It was also really good. And it was charming, it was wonderful, it was romantic, it was sweet, it was funny. And that's the real achievement there. I understand you don't see an all Asian cast every day in an American film, and there's, I'd like to see more Asian actors get more opportunities, but it's a good movie. That's worth celebrating.
Yeah, that was always my hot button because, Hollywood would say, okay, we'll make an Asian movie. And then they'd bring Asian actors from overseas to be in those movies. Jackie Chan, Michelle Yeoh. And I think what I admired so much about Crazy Rich Asians was these were Chinese, Asian American actors given a chance to finally shine in a Hollywood spotlight.
Yeah, totally agree.
More commentary here. Patrick Lemire says, I find it puzzling when people like Seth Rogen apologize for really funny movies. Yeah, could he can't make Pineapple Express anymore, or a film like that from earlier in his career. It's weird, and I feel like a lot of people have had to backpedal in order to continue working. Where do you see, my big question for you, Christian, is where do you see this all going? Do you see, I'm optimistic. I think the tide is turning. I think that now this is a conversation that's being had, not with just people, us talking to each other, or here with the people in the chat, our audience on YouTube. This is a conversation now. Like, how do you reach that balance, and where do you see this all heading?
Well, I think, a lot of the chat right now and the sort of the people weighing in, a lot of it is not questions. It's just sort of like, they don't get to talk about this sometimes in public. I think there's a cathartic nature to conversations like this, which is both great. And also, we shouldn't need that. You shouldn't have to talk about these topics in hushed whispers. That's wrong. I'm not as optimistic as you in the short term. I think we're going to go through some more troubling times. But I think the more people stand up and the more people support them standing up is what's going to break this. I've talked to a few different artists in recent months, and each of them would say, I was afraid, I spoke my mind, I felt punished, I was punished, there were consequences, but I ended up stronger. Tyler Fisher comes to mind, a very funny comedian. Gina Carano, of course, bounced back and just did a movie. I was on the set of that movie. I talked to a musician recently, 5 Times August is a sort of stage name, and he had the same kind of arc where it was scary. He shouldn't have kind of spoken out and just been himself. And yet when he did it, things got better for him. So I think we need to kind of send that message that's saying, if you do speak out, that it's not the end of the road. It's not going to collapse your career. There will be some struggles. There may be some hard times and some scary times. And I don't discount that. But the more people do it, the more people who are emboldened. And, we're not fighting for the right to say the N-word against people. We're not monsters. We just want to be free and to speak our minds and to share different thoughts and different perspectives. And that shouldn't be hushed. It's terrible. And I think that the people on the far left who invade this woke culture, I think they're really scared. They can't really defend their positions very well. And I think so because they can't, they shut people down. And that's a terrible place to be in this country.
Yeah, it's the climate of Hollywood is always fear. I feel like it's always fear of like living in fear to maintain your position or make moves to, climb. I call them climbers. I can always spot them. But I feel like now at least there's some sort of, this topic can be discussed. It's unfortunate that mostly that topic cannot be discussed publicly, right? There's not a public conversation of like, what are we trying to do? And I did a series of videos for Film Courage. I'm thinking that's how some people found me on YouTube. Didn't realize.
They're great.
Oh, well, thank you. I
knew you beforehand, but they were still great.
Right, but thank you for that. But one of them, I talk about like this whole idea of I want to see myself on screen, or I want to identify with the person who I don't necessarily. I feel like it's such a, to me, a narcissistic thing that I only want to watch media where there are people who look like me. I think that's very narrow-minded. But the point of all storytelling is that we experience a story and a world through someone who isn't us. And we are on an adventure with their story, whether they happen to be our same gender or race. That shouldn't matter. Like I grew up watching, and you might remember some of these shows, like remember What's Happening? I love that show. Remember Rerun? Raj, I love that show. And nobody looked like me on that show. It didn't matter because I identified with the story and with the struggles that they had. And it was a funny show, right? So, I mean,
I'm a white kid. I grew up with Good Times, What's Happening, The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son. I'd say the bulk of my favorite shows at one point were all black, minority, sort of majority black cast. I loved them. I never thought about it. My parents were racist. They didn't mention anything. So I just said, they're funny. I like these characters. I can relate to them. And by the way, like if I'm watching The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, it's a story about an entrepreneur's struggles. I'm an entrepreneur. I struggle. I can't identify with him. He's a dad. I'm a dad. How could I not identify with him? It seems crazy to even suggest, well, he's black. So what? He's a dad. He's struggling. He's trying to make ends meet. He's got a dream. How could I not connect deeply with that character? It's insulting to say that I can't.
That's my whole point, is that, it's an opportunity for people to just like step outside themselves. You mentioned Ripley earlier in our conversation. I mean, Ellen Ripley, that character, first of all, Sigourney Weaver, brilliant actress, but she carried the Alien franchise. I mean, really, Alien, without her, it's hard to really care, right?
Yeah.
Like we were invested in her story. And this is a great, Patrick Lemire is another great question, a great segue. Can the Oscars ever come back to be good again? They got rid of the Golden Globes for the foreign press not being diverse enough. I think award shows in general, there's just a lack of interest. I feel like this, what we've gone through the last 2 years have made a lot of us look at like, well, what's really important, right? And a lot of things are not particularly important. Award shows being among them, also being lectured. It's almost like celebrities feel obligated to, like, well, I have to do this. But what are your thoughts on the Oscars and just award shows in general?
I think they can be saved. I think maybe they never will have the cachet they once did. But I think if they focus on the glamour, the fun, the excitement, and the artistry, the Oscars is really an advertisement for Hollywood about what they do. They make films, and they should, plug directly into that. But there's an atmosphere in Hollywood right now, and it's really personified by the Oscars, is that it's not a let's put on a great show. It's not a let's celebrate the arts. It is let's virtue signal. Let's sort of tell people how good, noble, and just we are, and maybe even attack the people we disagree with. When you think about the Oscars, okay, let's say they have a monologue. You've got months in theory to work on that monologue. You've probably got a dozen writers or so working on that monologue. That monologue, that 7-minute bit should kill. Every joke should kill. It should slay. And you're going to watch it in a couple of weeks, and I guarantee it won't slay. I guarantee it won't be fun, because they very rarely are fun. But what they are is jokes about diversity or the lack of diversity, or jokes about female empowerment, or just fun is not on the menu. It seems bizarre that Hollywood doesn't put fun on the menu. But look at the shows. They're a slog. They're boring. They're drab. They're not exciting. They're not interesting. They're self-serving. When I was growing up, it was Billy Crystal and Jack Palance doing push-ups. It was fun. It was irreverent. It was joyous. I don't remember any major political statements. And, you always have a couple. That's fine. But it really seems to just dominate the show. I mean, you expect anyone who goes up and accepts an award to say, okay, what are they going to say? Is it going to be about poverty? Is it going to be about the war? Is it going to be about the president? I mean, it's just, and if the movie is about those topics, then I think it's actually pretty good. When Tom Hanks was talking about losing, I think he lost a mentor to AIDS maybe back in the day when he accepted for Philadelphia. That was extremely appropriate, right? That was the whole point of the movie. So I just don't think they care. A couple of years ago, I was watching an award show. It might have been the Golden Globes. I'm not sure what it was. It was Sandra Oh and Andy Samberg. These are two talented people. The monologue sucked. Now, you're going to tell me that they really tried to do the best jokes possible? And it wasn't just subjective, like maybe I didn't love the jokes as much as other people. It sucked. They weren't even trying to be funny, because that's not the mission anymore. It's so bizarre.
I think it's that I don't think they understand the audience who they want to watch this thing. The last time someone spoke to us normal people was Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
He was not speaking to the room. He was speaking to us as the audience. And I think Hollywood has forgotten that. They don't know us anymore.
And they don't want to. And, you get the award at the end of the day. That should be enough for you. But it is a broadcast. It is meant for the world to look at. And you have to really think about that. I mean, the fact that this show is still 3+ hours is an abomination. I mean, you'll watch it in a couple of weeks, and I guarantee you can sit there and say, could trim that, shorten that, change that, get rid of that. It doesn't need to be 3 hours. There's got to be a creative way to speed this thing along and to make it fun and make it, make it a celebration. That should be it. And, I don't want to say to the actors, you can't say this or that, but maybe just give them a little aside. So listen, guys, we're dying here. Can you just celebrate the movies? Can you maybe thank the right people? Can you really think about why we're here today, and not think about what cause you want to support that's just on top of mind? And maybe they wouldn't agree. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe it'll take a few years for that to kind of trickle down. But if you want to bring people back, if you want to put on a razzle dazzle show, you gotta be entertaining first and foremost. And why we need to tell Hollywood that is bizarre.
Yeah, it's the lecturing, I think, is just like, people just do not respond to that. It is just like, and it just feels so hollow and unnecessary. You're right. I think when it connects to the movie, like you mentioned, Tom Hanks, that makes sense, because that's what the movie is about. But beyond that, it's just utterly ridiculous. I think that, like, people are mentioning Ricky Gervais. I mean, that message, first of all, it's one of the best speeches ever given at an award show. Right. I mean, like, he just knocked. You saw how uncomfortable everyone in the room was, but it wasn't for the people in the room. But you're right, Alan, it's for the audience. Like, look, you're getting a lot of love in the chat. Piers Bronson says, totally agree, Christian. So,
by the way, last year at the Oscars, Regina King she wasn't even the host. She just got to introduce the event. I think it was her second or third line mentioned, the fellow who died at the hands of the Minneapolis police, George Floyd.
George Floyd, yeah.
Within the first minute, she mentioned that. This is an award show talking about movies. I don't think there were any George Floyd movies that year.
Yeah.
Why are you mentioning that right? And if you're, sort of on the borderline, you're like, all right, I'll watch the Oscars this year. I know it gets annoying and there's lectures, but I did love the show as a kid. I'm going to watch now. Click. You're done.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want George. I didn't want him to die. I thought the police did a horrible thing to that man. So it wasn't like I necessarily disagreed with what she said specifically, but really, it's like sitting down on a blind date, and the first thing that your date says, I love abortion, or I hate abortion. It's not the time or the place.
Yeah. I'm really curious I know that they've made some changes. In fact, they're not airing I think like 6 or 8 of the awards will be given at another event, and then they're going to do like a little quick synopsis, and it's for more of the craft awards, right?
Well, and the short films, all the short films.
Really, all the short films that'll be like off.
That's off camera, all off camera.
Yeah.
Indie filmmakers are finally able to join the party, and they've taken their category right off.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but not surprising. I don't know if award shows, when you look at the declining ratings, they were declining even before all of this. I mean, now it's just like with everything we've all experienced the last 2 years. I think when you see Hollywood get on the soapbox to kind of lecture you, the people, right, the elites, telling the little people what they should be thinking, it's not fun. It's not. You mentioned Billy Crystal earlier. I loved from when I was a kid, I've watched every Oscars show, right? And it's just become, it went through eras, right? Billy Crystal hosted, I don't know how many times he hosted. It had to be more than 3 or 4, but like that opening thing where he would insert himself into it was just hysterical. And like the one thing is that the thing that bothers me about these shows is you should have a sense of humor about yourself. And this is an opportunity to lampoon yourself. I think Ricky Gervais, laid that out there at the Golden Globes. If anything, the best move they could do is get Ricky Gervais, let him say whatever he wants, take their lumps, and just let him do it. I mean, it's like some of the best stuff was the unscripted, like coming out from a speech or just making a random comment that just was like a stinger, but like it's so controlled now. Now they don't even have a host. There are like 3 hosts. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, it'd be 3 hosts. Just imagine what the ratings would be if they said 2 weeks before, or whenever they announce the host, it's going to be Ricky Gervais and Dave Chappelle will appear at some point.
You're right.
Ratings double. So do you really want ratings, or do you not want ratings? Be honest, because you really don't want ratings, because that's the move you do. You say,
do these guys want to make money anymore? That's the question that's been going through my mind for months. Do they want to make money, or do they want to make a message?
I don't know. Just say, Mr. Gervais, the room is yours.
Oh, it would be epic. It would be epic. And I think it's what we all need, sort of a collective, like, let's not take ourselves so seriously. Let's not be so divided over, opinions. I always find that really troublesome.
And I think that would be that not only would it double the ratings, and not only would it be potentially hilarious, hopefully, I think it would have a lot of goodwill towards people. Say, oh wow, maybe that was really cool. I've been angry at Hollywood. I'm sick of the lectures, but you know what? They just hired Ricky Gervais to do that. That shows me something. They're really trying. They're really thinking that maybe they've kind of gone too far. I think a lot of people would think that. I would think that.
Yeah, I just don't think that people are up for, that 3-hour experience. There is that lull where it gets very boring. Right in the middle, it just gets so boring. I don't see how they're going to recover from this. It's just so. What do you think? What do you think about the Oscars' new rules regarding diversity? What do you think of that? Do you think that legislating aspects of art is going to lead to better art, or do you think that this is, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? There are these new rules. I don't believe that they go into effect this year, but it's coming up. What are your thoughts?
So you knock on the door and you say, "Excuse me, Mr. Scorsese, here's the checklist you have to follow." Really? Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah. Wow.
Mr. Tarantino, does your new film, does it adhere to this? Because otherwise I think you might not have a chance at a Best Picture Oscar. I mean, what else can you say? This is absurd. And I guess individual studios, individual films, if they want to have, I guess they call them writers. I think Frances McDormand mentioned them a couple of years ago. I guess individually, voluntarily, if they want to go about that path. I don't necessarily agree with affirmative action style policies, but there you go. Have at it. That's fine. Maybe more people that you didn't know were so talented will be part of the group. That's great. But mandating it, and then mandating it's like, okay, if your cast and crew isn't diverse enough, you better have a progressive theme in your story. That's over the top. I mean, that's crazy. And it's not the elixir for great art. You may get great art, that you never know where great art comes from. Right. But it just seems
Yeah, no, it seems bizarre to me, and it takes the freedom away from people to make something that may not abide by those rules. I mean, I think that's like just, in comedy and art, like half the fun is breaking the rules. And I mean, I'd love to actually see a documentary about Scorsese trying to follow those rules and make a mafia movie. That would be fun. That would be fun. But
and by the way, wouldn't it be great if Scorsese and Spielberg and Coppola and all the giants of film said, you know what, with all due respect, we deeply disagree with this thing. But you know what? They would be so excoriated. They would be chased out of Hollywood, even though they're the biggest names. They would be pummeled to the point where they would apologize and say, you know what, we should do this diversity checklist. That's the fear that's going on in Hollywood, because you can't tell me that a George Lucas or a Coppola or anyone like that is on board with that. You can't tell me that. I can't process that.
Well, it's depressing, but here's where we are. I think that, and I'm making this prediction now, so everyone watching this in the chat, or you're watching this later, here's my prediction. There is going to be a movie that comes out that will be beloved, that by all accounts should not just be nominated for an Oscar, should win Best Picture. But because it doesn't follow those rules, it's not going to get any nominations. That is going to happen. There will be movies. And it just makes you look and say, like, where's the freedom to, like, I mean, I'll say that diversity doesn't make things good. That is not automatically the check. There needs to be a different checklist. Mm-hmm. I like to say that, like, when Star Wars was made, there was a checklist. It was one checkbox called fun, entertainment, right? Yeah. Some amalgam of that. But then now the checklist is so involved with so many cooks and so many opinions being thrown in. It's a miracle that anything turns out decent. I look at a movie like Spider-Man No Way Home. I thought that was just sort of, at least, pretty devoid of wokeness for the most part. And it just was such a satisfying experience. I saw it 3 times in the theater, audiences erupting in applause. And you know what? It was a diverse group as an audience. Nobody cared. We all love Spider-Man. That's why we're here, to be entertained. I'm just really curious to see. Now, when it comes to documentaries, I've noticed a trend, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. I've noticed a trend where most documentaries now are either on one side of the political aisle or the other. It used to be you'd see a documentary. The documentary was seeking answers, was objective, sought out truth wherever that led. And now I get docs that are either, this is a doc that the agenda is far left. You look at the sources of financing, you're like, it's a far left movie. And same thing, the right does it too, right? There are other documentaries that are right. I think the only fair documentary I ever saw about Donald Trump was called The Accidental President, and it was made by a British filmmaker who was just trying to tell and interviewed people on all sides of the political aisle, like, how did this guy become president? And really, and doesn't really come down on one side or the other about what to think even about Trump. Just how did this guy become president with less spending and not having a real political machine behind him like Hillary had in the 2016 election? But what are your thoughts, and what have you observed when it comes to documentary filmmaking?
Part of me thinks that it's okay to have those films because they're more like op-eds, and you can see a very smart, impassioned op-ed from the left or the right. I do think that the ones that are more balanced are far more satisfying in general. I think one of the things that bugs me is that when this is about critics will look at a Michael Moore movie and more often than not rave about it because they agree with the general thrust of his opinions, even though the film is terrible or just poorly argued or sophomoric or terrible. Or just his last movie I thought was an abomination. It really did. And then conversely, if it's a right of center filmmaker doing a story, they'll be savage. So I think the film critics rankle me when they behave in such a extraordinarily partisan fashion. That's one thing, but I do think that it's more helpful and more thoughtful when there is more balance, when there are more voices there. And there was a movie a couple of years ago, I think it was How Jack Became Black. It was a deaf, black, he might be Jewish as well, filmmaker, who talked about his life, his struggle, the fact that his kids are very mixed. I think his ex-wife may have been Mexican. And sort of it was a journey about him. It was deeply personal, a little bit like Michael Moore, but he also invited other voices into the conversation, and it made it such a more interesting movie. So I do wish we should have more of that. It seemed like that should be the standard, and the more opinionated op-eds should be the exceptions to the rule. But I think it's flipped.
Alan, you reviewed that movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. It just shines a light on this argument about race that, it just gets muddled when, the fact that, we're not that pure anymore. We're doing a lot of mixing, and what are the implications of that in society? It's a great documentary. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
There's another great.
Even the voice was not as it wasn't like red meat driven. So.
Another doc I would recommend is The Boys in Red Hats. Have you heard of that one?
Loved it.
Covington? I love that doc because, look, I saw what a lot of people saw, or the way it was seen on television, and then you saw that like that was not the full context of what happened. And the documentary filmmaker who actually went to that school and did an I highly recommend The Boys in Red Hats. I just love that film because it really dispelled the myth of how those kids were portrayed and that journey. I thought it was very well done.
And he hit on both sides in that one too.
You do. Some interesting comments here that I want to get to, and we'll do our best. I don't know how much longer we have you for.
Yeah, I should wrap up soonish. My kids are wanting to soak up the Wi-Fi in the house, and I told them to stand down so the signal will be pure for you guys. So.
Well, here we go. This is maybe a good one to end on, and then Alan and I will keep talking. But Shinatsky says, "What's the solution to wokeness? Because these people aren't just going to stop." Do you have any thoughts on that, Christian?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's we need more brave people. We need more people to support those brave people. We need more voices, not less. And I think we need more conversation, more civil conversation, because at the end of the day, I love the fact that Hollywood is more diverse than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. That's a good thing. I'm seeing stories by Jordan Peele, and I may never have seen him before, directing horror movies, which I love. And so I think that's valuable. I think that's that can make Hollywood better. That can make the culture better. That can make us a more fair society where everyone, if they've got a strong creative voice, gets to be heard. And I think we should also use our economic clout to support these sort of alternative voices, the Ryan Longs, the JP Sears, the Tyler Fishers, the Chrissy Mayer. They're doing good work, and they're brave, and they're sticking their necks out there. And if we don't support them, then they retract the necks and they go away and they don't have a career. So I think if you can kind of support that kind of art, and even what the Daily Wire is doing, and I'm a contributor there, so you could say I have a reason to kind of praise them. But have you seen their first couple of movies? First of all, they're pretty good, and also they're really not very political at all. It's not exactly what you'd expect from it, but they're trying to be different. They're trying to open up the conversation, and I think that Run, Hide, Fight, while some may feel that a school shooting heroic movie is appalling, other people disagree and think it's worthwhile, and it's a good genre film. And I think we need to have a Hollywood that allows that. And I think that good for them for putting it out there.
Yeah, no, I really applaud what they're doing. And their films don't seem overtly political at all.
No.
In fact, there's a superhero one that they have that's premiering tomorroon called The Hyperion with Carrie Elwes that looks pretty fun.
I was disappointed, and I have to say, although Carrie Elwes is spectacular in the movie. He's so good. The rest of it isn't as good, but it's a swing,
Well, Alan and I will be reviewing that movie this Friday on our live stream. And Chrissy Mayer, I pre-ordered her album. I bought your book. Alan also bought your book. So I just want to say thank you, Christian Toto, for joining us here on Hollywood on the Rocks. Everyone in the chat, you need to, whether you listen to the book at the Audible version like I did, or buy the physical book like Alan, Virtue Bombs, How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul. Brilliant book. I also kind of feel like what you set up is kind of like a series. So before you go, Christian, can you tell us, will there be a follow-up to the book? Because it seems like kind of an open, you kind of bring us up to the present and a lot of what's happening, but will there be follow-ups or just more of your work on Daily Wire covering this?
I think the work I do on my website, my podcast, which is called Right on Hollywood, it really is the natural extension of the book. And I think I can react much more quickly. So I think the book hopefully is valuable in and of itself, but I think it really functions better from moving on as sort of a day-to-day covering the news, connecting the dots and doing the work I do. So, and hopefully more people can do it.
Christian Toto, dude, it's a pleasure. I'm so glad this finally happened. My apologies.
Me too. I was looking forward to this.
And it's also just great to chat with you. Your work is an inspiration. You're a voice people need to pay attention to. So,
and I love Alan's reviews, by the way. Thanks for doing great work.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
We cover the movies no one else will cover, like the Greasy Spoon. I'm serious. We do.
I know. I just did one on witchcraft. A documentary on witchcraft. So
that's why Film Thread exists. Christian, thank you so much. Have fun with your kids tonight, and
thank you.
You got a lot of movies to watch.
I do.
That's great. All right, take care. Later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. That's great. Oh my God. Want to thank everybody there in the chat just for like hanging out with us and I don't know. Just talking to Christian. This is what we're going to be doing on Hollywood on the Rocks. We're going to be bringing filmmaker friends of mine to speak very frankly about what's going on in the industry. I have a friend of mine who's a screenwriter who's going to be coming on in the coming weeks and fill us in on a lot of stuff happening. So look for our special guests on Hollywood on the Rocks. Let's get to the chat. I want to thank you, everyone here in the chat. Geek Truth 64 want to say just thank you. You guys are talking amongst each other here. I saw some really good comments here. Someone was saying that the Razzies should make them abide by all these same rules as the Oscars, which I think would be funny. Patrick Lemire, good to see Christian, who's a staple on Dennis Miller. Shanatsky's leaving. It sounds like peace, Chris and Alan. But thank you, Infinite Main. Awesome show. We do our best. We're not monetized right now. So the thing you can do maybe to help us out is share, like, subscribe if you have not already subscribed. I want to get back to talking about this Kenobi trailer. We'll kind of bring it back to that. We'll go for a little bit longer here, just because it really got me thinking. This is an opportunity, and I wonder if, and this is a question for the chat and a question both for you, Alan, because I think so much of what Disney has done with Star Wars and what they've done is they've created new TV shows and movies that have made us look on the old movies differently. And I don't think it's necessarily worked. I don't know that I need to know every detail about like the guy who designed the Death Star and his relationship with his daughter, or every single tiny detail about minor characters from the Star Wars universe. I don't need to know everything, because what I feel is when you're doing that, you're not creating anything new. You're just answering questions nobody asked. Mm-hmm. So here's my question. Will Kenobi be the first piece of new Star Wars? I hate using the word content. New Star Wars content that will make you look on something differently in a positive way. Because previous to this, the Star Wars sequels, it's kind of ruined the experience of watching the movies. Like I can't imagine sitting there with a kid who hasn't seen the original Star Wars trilogy and is watching it for the first time. They've just finished watching Return of the Jedi. They're on a high and, there's more movies. Can I watch episode 7? No, you don't want to see that. No. I mean, Han Solo getting, lightsabered by his own son in the next film after a painful space divorce, and he kind of becomes kind of a loser after reaching the heights of being a general in the rebellion. I'm curious if Kenobi is going to allow us to look differently on the original trilogy and the prequels, because this is the connective tissue, right?
Yeah.
Never been done. Is it going to make us, I think it's actually going to help us look more favorably on the prequels, because as they have aged, those movies have gotten better. And
here's the thing that I about Star Wars was there's George Lucas. He was the one who created it. He's the one who guided it. And whatever you feel about the prequels, that was his vision.
Right.
And then when he handed it over to Disney, they fired him. They said, all right, it's our child now. You know, just go off and do your little thing. And so the question is, you know, is Star Wars going to become DC basically, where it's run by committee and not by someone who has a specific vision for the story? And so that's where, you know, are we going to ruin Obi-Wan Kenobi forever now? Or is there someone in the organization that has a vested interest in this property and is willing to put it all on the line like George Lucas did?
Well, you bring up a really good point, because one of the things I felt was my first impression when I saw The Force Awakens was, I wish George Lucas was more involved. It felt like Lucas, his innovative mind was missing. There were so many things in The Force Awakens that bothered me that I thought were just lame. You know, I know everybody likes to piss on The Last Jedi. I despised Force Awakens. I was just like, well, we'll see if this, you know, maybe they're setting up the greatest trilogy ever made. They know what they're doing because now they can plan it out because they know they're making 3 films. Didn't turn out to be the case. But I remember there were so many little elements, even like the creatures, right? The creature designs, they, you know, like the sort of cantina scene that was in The Force Awakens, I thought was weak. I didn't think it added anything to lore. We're not talking about those characters. Yeah. And I think that you brought up a really interesting point. And when I first saw Force Awakens, I thought I remember that was the thing I said, like, it's really missing George Lucas's sort of magic touch. And forever the prequels, whatever the flaws of the prequels are, it's pure George. I mean, it's pure George. And I think that what's lacking is a singular creative visionary who can say yes and no, or this is the soul of Star Wars, right? Like it's missing. The soul of Star Wars no longer exists because it was one person. And when you look at all the great franchises, right? Let's take a step back and take a look. Great franchises. George Lucas, Star Wars. Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek. J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, with his spirit basically being, it's one of the videos I did for Film Courage, you know, Peter Jackson, really just, you know, he deferred to Tolkien whenever it came to any question, was like, we're making this as if he's in the room, right?
Yeah. You could throw Kevin Feige in that list with at least Marvel up until Avengers Endgame. You know,
after Endgame, he's lost the plot, in my opinion.
Yeah, but up until then, you know, Marvel Studios was the gold standard of superhero films, and Feige was the centerpiece of all that.
But I mean, also you look at like James Cameron with both, you know, Avatar and
Terminator.
At least, you know, the first 2 Terminator movies, right?
Yeah,
like
what he was involved with.
When he was involved. But when you look and when there's a singular creative voice, or it could be a group, you know, it could be like with whatever, you know, wherever you stand on South Park, right? It's Matt Stone and Trey Parker. And they're very anti-Hollywood. I mean, first of all, they're not even in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And secondly, I remember years ago when they did a movie, I try to recommend, like when we have these conversations, I try to recommend movies here and there that people may not know about, because there may be movies that were early in their career. But Cannibal the Musical is a movie that they made years ago. It was distributed by Troma. I don't know if Troma still puts it out, but Cannibal the Musical, and to promote Cannibal the Musical, I remember this, I think it was the late 90s or early, whatever, it was around that period. They came there, and to promote their movie, Cannibal the Musical, they put on a fake film festival called Lap Dance. So, you know, there was Slam Dance and Sundance. It was in Park City during Sundance. They basically had a party, and they, you know, were promoting Cannibal the Musical. That was their thought in doing it. The fact that these guys like showed up at the Oscars when they were nominated for, I think it was Best Song for South Park the movie.
Yeah,
and they showed up in those dresses. I mean, that was awesome. And Team America, by the way, Team America's come up in the chat a couple times. Thank you, Revenar, for that. And Patrick Lemire, I trust Favreau mostly. I agree mostly, but
I know I almost want to show my daughter Team America.
No, you don't. You actually do not, Alan. Be a responsible father.
I know. I'm like, I do, and I can't.
No, you don't. But it's so, I mean, like, just from the first 5 minutes of that movie, where they're basically doing a parody of Rent, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. The way that the puppets worked, the way that was just sort of very, it was just unafraid and didn't care. And that movie came out, I think it was 2004, if I'm correct.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Matt Damon was a big part of Hollywood at that time. Was that then? Or yeah, I guess it would be. Yeah.
But I'm loving the chat here. Geek Truth 64, which is now a chat regular. Thank you. Some franchises could still exist if people are willing to carry the baton and honor the original vision. When a corporation creator decides to superimpose their own vision, it kills the franchise. You're absolutely right. When a corporation puts the views of the corporation, that's where I feel like
that's where Star Wars is going.
Well, with Kevin Feige, I feel like he kind of like kept them at bay for a certain period of time. And there was, and I know someone knows that there was another producing partner with Kevin Feige there who was in conflict with Kevin for years. God, what was it? Someone in the chat let me know. I feel like Marvel feels different now. After Endgame, it feels different. I think it started with that Captain Marvel movie, which was just, I actually think that Brie Larson is a brilliant actress who is just not for this franchise. She doesn't work for me. What can I say?
Well, I mean, I think there was also problems with the story itself too.
Right. Absolutely. But when you've got that singular vision, even with Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? I mean, Gene Roddenberry was very involved in the beginning, but then, he faded into the background, and that took a couple seasons to get, by season 3 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, go rewatch it. There are episodes that right now, just thinking about those episodes are giving me chills, and maybe the production value doesn't hold up to what people can do today, but man, just the writing, it was the writing on that show that was just amazing. Star Trek.
Yeah. I mean, if you hate political correctness or wokeness, they did it right in terms of weaving it into a story and then making us think about these issues in a different way. And rather than just come out and say it and slap us in the face. I mean, have you seen the recent Star Trek stuff? Are they killing Star Trek now?
I watched the first 4 episodes of Star Trek Discovery and lost interest. I have watched videos of people complaining about it and talking about, how bad it is. My friend Robert Meyer Burnett, there's no bigger Star Trek fan than Robert Meyer Burnett. And the guy, his vast knowledge, he just knows it, and he does not like it. Picard,
I've feeling that too.
Yeah, I've only heard people complain about Picard. So I kind of, now I'm at the point where, do I want to just watch? I don't want to hate watch it. I want to watch something that I can get behind. I'm actually interviewing the director tomorrow, and and it'll be not for our live podcast, but just something I'll post on the channel. The director of this movie called The Changed. It's a horror movie that Tony Todd is in, and it's awesome. It's very relevant to now. I'd rather seek out things that are new and that I can like and champion, rather than just this sort of this depressing cycle of seeing beloved franchises, destroyed. And you can say like Old Man Yells at Cloud. I get it. Fine. That's a great meme. Please don't put me in that meme. But at the same time, there's something to that. And I don't think that these franchises are resonating. Otherwise, there would be more new types of franchises. Yeah. And James Alquist says RMB has the best Trek takes than anyone on the internet. I wholeheartedly agree, which is why it's like, you already got Robert Meyer Burnett. Talk to him.
Yeah.
He'll tell you. So Aiken asks, have you seen the Reacher series? I have not, but it comes highly recommended. Thank you for that, Aiken. Geek Truth back with some more geek truth. Chris, you might have seen one of my videos complaining about the new Trek. New Trek is the most destroyed franchise of all, in my opinion. And there are a lot out there. Yeah, I just get that. What the thing that comes up for me that I notice from a lot of these new things, whether it's superhero and or Star Trek, is it feels like there has been a shift in the values of the people who write these shows. And it feels like, and this is going to sound very weird observation, it's weird, but I notice it feels like a lot of the people writing this stuff haven't lived enough life to bring life experience to the writing. In particular, it feels like, I mean, one of the things, Alan, you're a parent, you're a dad. I'm a dad. My kids are grown and gone. There's self-sacrifice. You have to sacrifice. You have to put yourself, you're not the number, you're not number one to you. Your kids come first in all things, right? Like that, that is the most important thing. And I feel like there's a profound lack of values that I notice in a lot of this, you know, whether it's a new series or a film. And I'm like, well, what are the people that are behind this? What do they care about? Where are their real core values? And I feel like there is a lack of that. I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
No, I think you said it all. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in terms of, you know, even with Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, you know, there was, you know, it felt like Star Trek. It had everything. You know, there was at least an acknowledgement of the spirit of Gene Roddenberry in those, and I think that's gone now. You know, maybe he's been dead too long. You know, and I think about Disney movies. I've been thinking about it a lot in terms of what happened to Walt Disney. You know, have we cast him aside? Has he officially been canceled, but been done under the table? You know, it's these great storytellers, and we've lost their spirit, I feel like.
I agree. And, you know, you look at like what Walt built from his studio to animation. And if you know the history of Walt Disney, even the building of Disneyland and what he did, this is a guy that innovated. I mean, most people might not even know this story, but a couple things about Walt Disney. Two things you may not know that now this is water cooler talk. And I want to say, Fletcher Williams, thank you. This is the story of the film threat ship, its continued mission to seek out cool movies and new filmmakers to boldly go where no studio has gone before. That's a terrible William Shatner. But thank you for that, Fletcher. And thank you everyone who's continuing to watch. But real quick, two quick stories about Walt Disney. And you can't unsee this. I think we're off the Kenobi topic now.
Yeah.
But real quick. So, I want to say, like, if you want to contact us, you can contact us. We're pretty easy to get to. Go to filmthreat.com/contact. Real quick. Walt Disney made short animated movies. That was the industry. You went to the movie theater in the 20s and 30s and you watched, you know, a couple short animated movies, then you get your feature, whatever. One thing that Walt Disney noticed, and when I tell you this, you can't unsee it. Whenever he put in cute butts, if there were children in the audience, they all giggled and laughed. And the effect that had is to get everyone in the movie theater to laugh. Why are they laughing? I don't know. Something's funny. What am I seeing? Thumper's butt, say in Bambi. Or you look at Pinocchio. You look at all of Walt's early work and, you know, in particular the short films, and there are a lot of butts. Now they're all innocent. They're all like just a cute animal butt, or somebody hides in a bush, but the butt is sticking out. And
non-sexualized, basically.
It's not sexualized. It's just lots of butts, but that made little children laugh, which then that had the effect of everybody laughing. So Walt Disney liked to put butts in his movies, and you can look this up. This is known amongst animators. If you look up Walt Disney butts, cartoon butts, whatever, do yourself a favor and look up that search. So that's number one. And now when you see it, you're going to notice the early Walt Disney animated movies, there are a lot of butts, and it was just a dumb joke that little kids like. The other thing is about Disney. They thought he was crazy. Walt Disney, by the way, went bankrupt. He filed for bankruptcy, I believe it was 7 times, right? So if you ever look at your life and you look at like what your struggles are, think of this guy and the risk that he took. He filed for bankruptcy 7 times in his life and continued doing, the Walt Disney Company. But additionally, excuse me, we're having weird weather here. What can I say? The other thing that Disney did is when he embarked on making Snow White, they thought he was crazy. No one is going to sit through a cartoon that's as long as a feature. And by the way, Snow White is short. It's like just over 60
minutes. A little bit over an hour, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a little over an hour. So, but no one had done this before, right? He made short animated movies. They called Snow White Disney's Folly. He's crazy. No one is going to sit through a cartoon that's as long as a feature movie. You're crazy. And of course, here we are today. Animated features are just a part of the genre. It's an award at the Oscars. But they thought he was nuts for wanting to make a cartoon that was as long as a feature film, because previous to that, people made short animated movies. And I've been fortunate enough to go to the studio. I've had friends who work there, so I've gone there for lunch, and I've seen the machine. They developed a machine and technology just to make Snow White. And the camera, which is bigger, almost bigger than the room I'm in right now, which is kind of my little studio with a lot of comic books and crazy stuff sitting around. It's a giant, giant machine. Look for that. If you ever have the opportunity to do the studio tour, ask to see this machine that they used to make
Snow White. It's a multiplane camera, isn't it?
It's a multiplane camera is what it is. So very, very fascinating. So
yeah, I'll go. I mean,
Fletcher Williams. Real quick to Fletcher, we can't do super chats. It's because this sounds, and Alan, I had to tell you about
I was asking you about this.
We had to change our email for the AdSense, for Google AdSense. Don't ask why. We should be out of it. I've gone through the process. It's not anything nefarious, nothing weird. We weren't demonetized. We had to kind of re-authenticate our monetization. We should have monetization back on Friday. So please, Fletcher, thank you for asking that.
But we've grown so much, we actually have to do accounting.
Right. Well, we had to it's, it's boring. I don't want to get in. I don't want to get into
No, but it's a good sign of success for Film Thread. And
that's a Culture Casino. Thank you for joining. I was just talking to Culture this morning on Midnight's Edge with Tom and Andre. It was the multiplane camera. Yeah, if you've seen it, it's huge. I mean, it's, like I say, as big as the room that
I think they bring it to D23 once in a while. But the other thing is the parks. Walt Disney made Disneyland because he wanted a park to take his daughter to.
Right.
And now I can't even take my daughter to that park.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Patrick Lemire, it was all hand drawn. So an hour plus of animation was mind-boggling effort. Yeah. For back then, you didn't have computers. It's all like handcrafted. So I just find it really interesting that he basically banked his entire studio, everything that Disney had built up to that point, on Snow White. Like, I'm going to make a feature length, and Snow White, it's kind of quaint when you look at it now. It's not a lot of conflict. It's, and
really generic characters, except for the dwarves, maybe.
Except for the dwarves, which, their personalities are effectively their names. Now, how are they going to handle them dwarves in this new incarnation?
I believe they're not using dwarves, because
they're just using like people that they're going to make tiny. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I know.
Have we gotten to this point now that I just think it's stupid.
Well, someone just I guess one of the basically 7 little people just lost their jobs because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's pretty weird. Also, because if you think, George Lucas loved little people.
Mm-hmm.
He built he built a whole franchise that didn't really take off on little people. I mean, he put little people in all the Star Wars movies. Although I do think that the Jawas were actually Gary Kurtz's kids, if I recall correctly. A couple of them were Gary Kurtz's kids. Kenny Baker, of course, was famously in R2-D2. He wanted it known. I mean, he's not in. I mean, he's kind of hopping around, and you saw like those weird, like, it looks like insulation going to the legs. It's funny. You look back and like some of those effects were just practical effects. But George Lucas, I mean, you look at the Ugnaughts. I mean, he kind of wove in little people into almost all the Star Wars films. Fletcher Williams, thank you. All those in the chat, you can support Film Threat by getting a t-shirt, or you could get a mug. You can get a mug like this mug. This is a cool mug right there. Why not? Grab. Everybody needs mugs, coffee mugs, t-shirts, whatever. Grab something if you're so inclined. And look, the correct term is altitudinally challenged, Adam Gray.
That's a weird word. All right.
Yeah, and Patrick Lemire says Peter Dinklage is going to get a dwarf beatdown. That was a weird comment. And I actually heard the entire entirety of that comment, not out of context. A lot of people kind of like took this out of context, the one quote, and actually in context, I think he had kind of a good point. What he was talking about wasn't necessarily about the dwarves. It was more about Disney's hypocrisy about virtue signaling, right? That's more what it was about. So, and Geek Truth 64, first rule about Film Threat is don't talk about Film Threat. I would agree. Here we go. We got to wrap this up, but I got to say, Alan, thank you for being here on a Wednesday night for Hollywood on the Rocks, which is going to be our evening show. It's not always going to be on Wednesdays. We'll be doing an evening show every week where we're going to talk about a topic. We'll have a special guest like Christian Toto. Love to get Christian Toto back. But we'll have a special guest to talk about movies, to continue to build this community here. Part of why I wanted to become more involved on YouTube was to support the growing number of indie filmmakers in terms of how to get your projects made, how to get your projects out there, how to get distribution even. So, and Fan Art Exhibit says, Chris, been watching your interviews on Film Courage. You're speaking truths Hollywood desperately needs to hear. You would be shocked, Fan Art Exhibit, how many people at all levels reach out to me unsolicited to tell me they saw my Film Courage things and love what I'm saying, or love a certain comment or particular video. And so I know people that are other people are listening, and
your representation video is up now. So I think that dropped in the last day or so.
Oh yeah, that's on Film Courage. Revenar, George Lucas, like Warwick Davis, that he even made a movie starring him. That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's I don't know. Like it's so bizarre. Like it's just so bizarre, the place that we are at this moment, and that this all has to be. I feel like I hate to say this. I feel like a lot of it is just a lot of people that are lacking in knowledge. Meaning, when I see some of the opinions on Twitter about movies, it's as if this person has not seen movies that are more than 10 years old and feel that they're an expert, and then everything should be judged. And I feel like you need you really need to know your film history. And a lot of the things that that people complain about, I feel like it's like, oh, this was especially the subject of diversity comes up. I just thought things were always diverse. Like it's just now that we talk about it more. So I don't know.
That's a bigger discussion.
It's a bigger discussion.
I've got thoughts on that, but this is a bigger discussion.
This is why I don't have these debates on Twitter, because I think Twitter's a waste of time. It's a time suck. It's the worst social media platform. It completely lacks nuance, and nobody listens. There's no conversation. Here we are having a conversation together, and I'm happy to talk to people, who where my views may disagree with my own, and that's fine. And
when was the last time you changed your mind because of a tweet or an update
or an Oscar speech?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone has. Geek Troop 64. Yeah, we should get the AdSense thing squared away by Friday. It is really it's not anything nefarious or weird. So, but I thank you for people saying that they want to help. That's awesome. You can buy something off the Film Threat website, and also I'm
super chat, buy a shirt.
You can so many kids aren't shown movies from the 70s. let alone the golden years of Hollywood. That's right. Yeah. Those old movies that are in black and white. Ugh.
Okay, well, I kind of get that one.
Yeah. Now, Patrick Lemire, Twitter amplifies the worst of everything. I agree. Twitter isn't, and Geek Truth 64. Twitter isn't about talking to people. It's about talking at people. Yeah, that's why I just don't like it.
Just that phrase, Twitter blew up. It's like, well, who is Twitter? And
right.
It's like, who is that? Is it
Well, we started this conversation with, we started talking about Kenobi, then we talked to Christian Toto, who that's his first book. I've written several books myself, and here's something that I can give to you, and it costs nothing. If anyone here in the chat or watching this video later, do you want to know how to write a book? Because when I wrote my first book, which was in 1999, I didn't know how to write a book, and I came up with a process to write it. I don't even need to send you a book. It's a several thousand word essay. Excuse me. Oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. But anyways,
it's getting way too cold.
Apologies. If you would like a copy of this essay, you can go to filmthreat.com/contact, ask me, and I will send you a PDF of this essay that I wrote about how to write a book. It's about how to write a nonfiction book. It's a simple process that you can use for yourself. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Thank you for people saying bless you in the chat. So, and here we go. Fan art exhibit was joined. I used to watch movies decades before I was born. I don't understand people who don't want to watch films before 1990. Yeah, when I was watching, even I grew up in the 70s, and I'm watching a lot of movies that were made in the 70s that for the first time. But I was always like going and revisiting like old movies from the 40s or 30s and wanting to know. Like, I went to retrospective screenings of films like The Wizard of Oz or Gone with the Wind in theaters. Additionally, I went to see a lot of Toho movies, monster movies, Godzilla movies, Godzilla versus this smog monster. I saw that in the theaters when I was a kid. So I love that kind of stuff. So yeah.
I'll tell you, I have not come up with the right bribe to get my daughter to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders is not even that. You're kidding.
I know. It's like everything I throw at her, she does. No. It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. Oh my God. I have to have a talking to your daughter. Gotta have a talking to your daughter. But I want to wrap it up here and just say thank you again to everyone in the chat. You guys are awesome. This is great. We're going to continue these conversations. And the same threads are just going to come up. Star Wars is going to come up, Kenobi. I'll probably watch. Kenobi will be a series I will more than likely watch just because I feel it is the possibility of being something awesome. We'll see.
It's our only hope.
Exactly. Additionally, we'll talk about every week indie film. Alan and I watch movie. We're going to be talking about this movie, The Changed. We'll probably talk about it on Friday. Yeah. We're also going to talk about the Hyperions.
Yep.
Right, Alan. I don't know about
Turning Red. We'll talk about Turning Red.
Oh, Turning Red. Yeah, Turning Red. So, and we'll also continue our conversation of the Batman because I've had more thoughts on it. So join us Friday, 9 a.m. for our live stream where we'll be talking about indie movies. And I forget who our guest is on Friday. Somebody interesting will be here on Friday. So thank you to Patrick Lemire, Dances with Squirrels, Deleted Scenes, Geek Truth 64, Wesley M, Infinite Main, Aiken. I'm going through.
Just one man laughing.
Well, yes, all of you. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day. I appreciate you spent time with us today. Love it. Take care.